Okay, everybody. Today we've got Wilson Zier. Take it away, Wilson.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about student engagement, community enrichment, and experiential learning, and how those come together in our capstone class in the College of Business in BA 498. In addition, through the work that we do, we're able to help accomplish Goal 5 from the Ascent, serve as the educational, economic, and cultural engine for rural places. So let's talk a little bit more about that. In November of 2019, excuse me, in November of 2019, I did another presentation where we talked about student engagement. And I made the point at that time that student engagement wasn't just about connecting the faculty with a student. Student engagement was connecting faculty with a student, faculty with a class, students with students, and then connecting all of that with the university and the community to add value in all the communities that we serve. I did an entire presentation on the course elements that allow us to achieve that, and we'll touch on some of that over the course of this presentation as well. So BA 498 is a capstone in the College of Business. It's called Business Policy and Strategy. A lot of universities have a capstone course like this, a 495. Well, excuse me, Portland State, it was called 495. Concordia was 498. Here it's 498. Years ago at Portland State University, and in fact, not just Portland State, but a lot of universities have a capstone program, not just business policy and strategy. And at Portland State University, every student in the university is required to complete a capstone program that engages with the community in order to graduate. That's across the university, not just the College of Business. The College of Business had one as well, so I was engaged as part of a faculty team to develop a capstone program for the College of Business that would satisfy the requirements of the College of Business and the university itself. So we put together a program that was business policy and strategy, where you have the curriculum related to the business policy and strategy, but you also have this live consulting engagement with a community partner. And a community partner can be a nonprofit, it can be a government agency, it could be a for-profit enterprise. And then the students complete that consulting engagement as a way to pull together everything they've learned over the course of their education and use it to create value for the community. So we put that program together at Portland State. It's still running today. I've created a similar program like that at Concordia University when I was there. And we've been doing something similar at EOU since I arrived here in 2015. So the basic idea is to help the students acquire the skills they need for policy and strategy from an educational standpoint, but help them acquire the additional skills they need for their professional career based on the exercises and the consulting engagement contained in the class. So we want to take a look at that. Oh, sorry. So the learning outcomes for the class are students will demonstrate their ability to apply and implement business concepts and strategies based on the current state of business conditions. They'll able to develop a mission statement, perform an external audit, conduct an internal assessment, and formulate, implement, and evaluate strategies. You'll see that we have some traditional types of tools in here where the students have to complete quizzes, they have weekly learning exercises. This is for an on-campus course, so we have attendance and participation. In the online course, there would be discussion groups that allow students to interact in not the exact same way, but in a similar fashion. And then we have this consulting engagement that really satisfies the learning outcome number one, really pulling together all of the business concepts and strategies that they've acquired over the course of the degree program and using it in a way that's productive, that creates value. So let's look at some examples of some of the projects we've done. One of the early ones we did is with the state of Oregon, with the Charter Ranger District And DEQ, we actually looked at biomass fuel. They had 2 coal burning plants in Hermiston that they were looking at converting to biomass fuel pellets based on trees they were thinning out of forests in other parts of Oregon. So we looked at the costs associated with, harvesting the trees, turning them into pellets, transporting them, generating fuel, looked at the fuel efficiency, and were able to make a recommendation to DEQ and to the state. We did another one for the state of Oregon for the regional task force looking at workforce housing. It turns out in the state of Oregon, there is quite a bit of low income housing. There's also quite a bit of housing for people who can afford to spend more. But if you're in the middle, affordable workforce housing, especially for places that are growing rapidly, like Hermiston and Portamoro, is very hard to come by. And so we were asked to explore why, what the obstacles are, why contractors aren't getting involved, why people aren't putting together that housing, especially if it's a lucrative market and there's demand for it. We looked at Eastern Oregon University, back when we still had a grass field, a turf field, and the old track. So we looked at, the what it would take to put a field house and help work on those initial plans. As you see from looking out the window around campus, looking out the windows around campus now, they're in the process of putting a field house where the old baseball diamond used to be. We also looked at the turf field and redoing the track, which has both been done. So we were able to help provide some of the initial work on those projects. We did some work with Union County looking at the Buffalo Peak Golf Course. It turns out that the Buffalo Peak Golf Course is owned both by the county and the city of Union, but it's also an extension of their, believe it or not, their water treatment facilities. So once they process water and they have gray water, one of the ways they get rid of it is by watering the golf course and use the golf course as a natural filter before that water returns to the streams. So this golf course, even though it doesn't make money, it does provide a useful, service to the community. But they were also looking at, in spite of that service, how can we make it more profitable? How can we get people to use it and make it a more integral part of the community? And we looked at a few different ideas for that. Boise Cascade, we looked at a couple of different projects for them. One, they were asking about community visibility, how visible they were. They do a lot of things in the community, donate a lot of money, but how visible were they, and what was their perception in the community? So we were able to help nail that down. They also were having some staffing issues, finding skilled employees in specific areas. So we were able to look at the recruiting process, the types of employees in the area, even educational programs that we could put together. We did a project, we've done a couple of projects now for a company called Skipline. They were recently acquired by another company called SpecRite. And Skipline is the world leader in controls for road striping machines. Believe it or not, these machines you see on the highway, you look at the 2 tanks on back, one of them is filled with glass beads, the other one's filled with paint. And then they take them out on the highway and they draw the stripes, the reflective stripes that are on the road. But they need controllers to help guide the truck. And to be, in cases where you have the dash lines, they have to be able to turn the paint machine on and off to get the dashes in the right place. You can imagine if the truck goes different speeds, if it goes faster, it has to turn on off faster. If it goes slower, that has to be variable as well. So there's quite a bit of technology that goes into being able to do that. So we looked at, did a market survey and looked at market share size and growth potential for the company in an earlier project. Recently, we looked at their carbon offset and the carbon offset for these trucks across the country and how we could build a program that would allow them to offer their customers a carbon offset for their road striping activities. We also looked at a new service offering that would be based more on data, with a cloud-based service, looked at what that transition would look like, what the obstacles are, and what the ingredients for success are. Just one more example is Nicole Lewis. Nicole Lewis is a country music star, a rising country music star. She's also done some voiceovers for things like the movie Frozen. You can see some of the sample of some of her music here below. We won't have time to listen to it today, but when you go back and look at the slides, feel free to click on a link. She's really done a great job over the last few years. She started out here in LeGrand, went to the music scene in Spokane, and today is in Nashville. But she was really looking for, how do you grow your career? And it turns out the music industry has changed a lot in the last 20 years. Most of the way people consume music today is by streaming, but artists don't make very much money from streaming. So we had to really look at the industry, understand the composition, understand how you make money in this industry, and then provide advice to Nicole on how she could help build her career and take advantage of the current structure that exists today. The link at the bottom is for a pub talk. Nicole actually did a pub talk presentation for us that we captured, and she talks about the work that the 498 team did for her in that presentation. So if you get time and you want to listen to it, it's a really good piece. Those are just a few examples. Here on this list, you can see a list of some of the projects we've done, just these capstone programs, the 498, you can see the left column, there's almost 50 of them now. We have at the top, you'll find a link to a live stream site where we have a lot of them out there. Some of the earlier ones weren't recorded because we weren't very experienced at doing that. And the technology was not as readily available. But more recently, the projects from both our online and on-campus students have been saved. The on-campus students usually do a presentation. We have the relevant decision makers come into class. Online students create a YouTube video of their findings so they can be shared with a client. In addition to that, the key learnings from working on this 498 project has given us the tools we need just to incorporate live projects for community partners in our other classes as well. So BA 346 e-marketing, promotional strategy, consumer behavior. So we've got 33 plus. I mean, we have to be over 100 of these projects now in just the last 5 years. Digging forward on structure, here's the idea, is that with 498, we have the business strategy curriculum. The students do the reading and we discuss it in class, and we discussion topics. But then through their consulting engagement, we actually try to apply those principles. In an on-campus course, we'll actually pull scenarios out of their consulting engagement, put them on the board, work through them on the class, use the strategic models, and show students how they can use these tools to solve problems. So the curriculum gives them a set of knowledge and tools, and they have a whole lot of additional knowledge and tools from their undergraduate education experience. And then we apply them to the consulting engagement so they get hands-on experience on how those tools work. Key to this process is the active engagement of faculty, to actually find a project, but actually work with the students to frame them and to solve them. It's a 10-week process, and there's a lot of work involved. So we have to provide, advice, guidance, insight. The result of that process is that students provide, the university provides additional value to the students, the university and the community, but the students also provide additional value to the university and the community. So it creates a very symbiotic relationship with the communities we serve, and that gets us to our goal 5. If we think about how that course is put together tactically, what we use is the core principles that were discussed in the November presentation. We use a common core, whether it's an online or an on-campus class, we use a common core in Canvas. So as the course is set up in weekly modules, each weekly module has readings, articles, and videos that describes what we're doing through the week, has a presentation, has a quiz, and some assignments. In addition, at the beginning of the week, every week, we welcome the students. We summarize what happened last week, explain what we'll be doing in the week to come. And we usually try to tie in some community events. So, tie it to the community, let them know that, that we're here, we're connected, we're part of what's going on in the world. This is not just some kind of an isolated classroom environment. And then we've got the group project that goes throughout the term. You'll find here a clip to the original presentation. It's about 31 minutes, but well worth it in my opinion. But if you click on the link, it'll bring that presentation up, and you can look at some of the core principles of engagement that we talked about earlier. Going to the next one, in terms of the project and deliverables, we have one student team per project. Those teams are usually 4 to 5 students. If we have more students, we'll take on additional projects. It doesn't really work as well to get below 4 students. We've done some with 3 students, but it's really, especially, you're never positive if you're going to end the term with the same number of students you started with. So with at least 4 students, even if you have students drop or get behind or people who don't participate as actively, you'll still have enough students to really get the project delivered. And we've got a community partner counting on us at this point. So we need to deliver the project. That's the one thing that's unlike a regular class. We have somebody counting on the work product. So we work with the client to negotiate the statement of work. The deliverable is usually a 20 to 40 slide PowerPoint presentation with detailed note pages. And that'll be equivalent to a 20-page paper with 20 high-quality references. So it is a research project as well, but it's a focused research project that's designed to benefit the client as well as the student. We assign class time as needed. If any students have problems with their project, they run into obstacles, we put them up on the board and we walk through them as a class. That gives all of the students a chance to see it, work through it, and use the tools appropriately. And as I mentioned earlier, I think in on-campus presentations, we do a formal presentation. When online, we do a YouTube video, and the YouTube video is shared with the client. But we try to get, the senior executives the executive from whichever organization we're working with, we get them to engage with the students so they can present their findings and their ideas. And they need to be able to defend them. When people ask questions, they need to be able to describe how they came up with the answers they came up with and why it makes sense. That's part of the exercise too, is to be able to justify your findings. We've had President Insco and most of the cabinet members in class at one time or another to see a presentation. We've had representatives from the state, from organizations. We presented in the boardroom over at Boise Cascade. So this is a really, for the students, the final presentation, not only is it kind of high pressure, but it's high reward as well. They get to, really get the pride that comes with delivering those results. As I mentioned before, it's 10 weeks. We get started right away. Teams are picked the first week. We, start your ensign. Let's get going. We give them a deadline. It's due Tuesday of finals week. There are no extensions. Client is expecting it. They'll be there to get the presentation, and we just launch right into it. You can see the more detailed schedule here. Week 1 through week 10, we start out with the project overview. We really like to have the client come in on the first class and actually either come in person, or we'll do a Zoom video and have the client explain the project and answer questions for the student, form this one-to-one bond right up front. They can see the client can see them, and set expectations. We choose teams right away. We get into week 2 as a class. We discuss the different projects and the clients and what needs to accomplish. That way we have a chance to help each other and set some context. And then the students have to create a draft statement of work. The draft statement of work is pretty key to the success of the project. If it's too expansive, they won't be able to deliver it all. If it's too narrow, it won't add much value to the client. So there's a negotiation process that happens there as we find a statement of work that works both for the students and for the client, and for me as well. Part of my job in this role is make sure they don't overpromise and they have something not only they can deliver, but that's relevant to the class as well. Once we have an approved statement of work, they're often doing the research and building a draft presentation week 3 through week 6. It's about this point where the students figure out how much needs to be done and how little time 10 weeks actually is, where they just look like a deer in the headlights. It's like, oh my gosh, we'll never finish them. But, we've got this deadline. We've got incomplete information. There's big holes. We're trying to make phone calls. Nobody will call us back. We can't find the information on the internet. Oh my gosh, this is a train wreck. It's never going to work. But that's part of the process, right? Because that is real life. So about week 7, they do an initial client presentation. They get initial feedback from me and from the client. And, they start getting closer. About that time, you see people start to settle in and say, hey, this really might work, And so then we revise and refine, expand, and we do the final client presentation. And I can tell you that the look of pride, on these students' faces when they can deliver that project is something amazing, and the people that have sat in on it, Gary Keller, Steve Clements, other instructors who've had a part in educating these students, they just say it's just an amazing transformation. It's just an amazing thing to see. These students that have come through this process and now are out ready to be business professionals, be able to deliver something professional for a client. So it's really something to see. The process itself involves a lot more than what you can see in class, because we have to find these projects. We have to build a pipeline of relevant projects. So that requires a constant process of networking, relationship, promotion, referrals. If we can identify clients who may have projects, then we need to get together with them and talk about their business or their organization, what kinds of challenges they have, and how we could solve it. Oftentimes when we first meet a client, it's not obvious to them how we might help. First of all, it may not be obvious that they have issues that we could help solve. But secondly, it's not obvious that how they would go about doing that. So that's part of the process up front, is figuring out, slicing and dicing it to figure out what the issues might be and how we might address them. And so we have to look for projects that are not only relevant to the kinds of strategy lessons we're teaching, but they're achievable in 10 weeks, and they'll add value to the client and to the students. And so that actually takes a bunch of work, both up front and over the course of the class, because somebody has to manage the relationship with the client as well. There is a sales cycle, just like in sales. It takes time to engage with the client, work through this discovery process, and come up with projects. So we need to have a funnel. We need to update that funnel on a continuous basis to make sure we have projects to feed it. I think the other thing, and I put in the lower left-hand corner, this idea about setting expectations. Setting expectations on a project like this, or on a series of projects like this, is really important. we say to the clients up front, hey, these are undergraduate business students, and they're working on this project, and I'm going to help them. But this is not like McKinsey. You're not going to get, a $50,000 consulting engagement in a polished three-ring binder, or in a polished presentation. But every one of our clients has told us they've gotten something useful out of these projects. And I can tell you that the students have as well. So if it's big, or if we find issues that we need to explore further, it's not unusual for us to take on the project again in another term and dig deeper, or take it another direction. And so we have another student team take over for the last team and explore something still further. So, but helping the client understand up front, helping the students understand what they have to accomplish, and helping the client understand what they're going to get is really important to assure success. And so through that process, we help the students really tie together everything they've learned, make the transition from their educational career to their professional career, and enable and start them down the road to a career of lifelong learning. And that's what we're here for.
So I got a question.
Sure.
What are the challenges in delivering this program in terms of education? Like, what are the struggles that you face, doing this?
There are a lot of struggles. There, or I wouldn't say struggles, but there are things that we need to work on for sure. Some of them are similar to like a regular course in that, life happens, students are busy, students lose focus. Things happen with clients too. Clients, they'll have a meltdown that they have to deal with. They have emergency travel, so we have those kind of issues to deal with. The other kind of thing is the students are learning these tools, and so sometimes they're misapplied, and we need to circle back and apply them again. We need to refocus. But every time, which is not a bad thing, but every time you circle back and refocus, it also takes time. And we are racing against the clock here, right? So the other piece of this that students learn too is that, in order to be successful, I have to deliver something that adds value to the client. But I only have a certain amount of time, which means it's probably not going to be perfect either, right? So I have to figure out what the most important things are and make sure I deliver on those most important things, even if I'm a little light on some of the less important things, because I have to make the date in order to be successful.
Yeah, so a follow-up to that is, as an educator, what is it that you've learned? This is a very unique program. And like you talked about, you have unique challenges. There's probably things that you see sort of continually, but what is it as an educator that you've learned and had to kind of, work to meet the needs of the students and also these clients?
That's a great question. This type of program is really interesting to me because of the different variety of problems we have to solve. So it takes a lot of skills on my part too, right? I have to be able to understand the music industry. I have to be able to understand the road striping industry. I actually help the students work on most of the research for these projects, right? If they can't find something, then I help them. Take the example of the road striping machines. We were trying to figure out the size of the market. Students, we were able to look online and find some information on the total miles of highway in the United States by state, and then try to figure out the number of road striping machines required for each state to do that highway, to take care of that highway. And they couldn't find the information. And I said, well, why don't you just call the Department of Transportation. I said, what? So, well, yeah, we'll just send an email and then we'll make a phone call. And then they'll tell us how many trucks they have in each region. And we'll look at the number of miles in each region and we'll calculate the ratio. They said, well, can you do that? Can you like call people? Well, yeah. It was just a funny aha moment for me where I realized these students live in a world where they just Google everything. It had never occurred to them that they could like talk to a real person and ask questions. So that was interesting. It's also, one of these things where the students spend most of the time in their educational careers working on exercises where there's a right answer and a wrong answer. All the information's there, and you just have to organize it and put it in the right box. But this kind of problem, solving these kind of problems that oftentimes are unstructured, oftentimes there's missing data, that's a new challenge for a lot of them, and they're uncomfortable with it. They're uncomfortable with, what do you mean there's no right answer? Maybe there's a range of right answers. Maybe there's a best answer and a less best answer and a not so good answer. Hey, maybe there's no good answers at all. Maybe they're all bad and you have to pick the one that's the least bad.
Right, and then and provide some kind of rationale as to why you made the selection that you did.
Exactly. Well, and you have to use an analytical process to do that. You can't just say, oh, it's option 3. You have to say option 3, and I know that because I did this, and I did this, and I did this. And that's the answer that makes sense.
So how do you get students to understand that?
That's a great question. I mean,
if their mindset is over here and they need to be over here so that they can be productive as they go forward in their life journey, what are the tools or techniques that you described 1 or 2, but there's got to be some strategies behind this, and you've got to have some expectation that this is coming. So how do you monitor that or regulate that?
The biggest thing we do is work through these together in class. As a class, when we first started doing this, the students would go off and they'd just go off and talk amongst themselves and come back to stuff, and that didn't work out very well. They produced some stuff that was interesting, but at the same time, it wasn't the quality we needed, and the students were not
probably limited in their scope because they didn't have a frame of reference, like this thing that you're talking about where they're just Googling something and they come back with a few Google things, but they didn't think about it, in a broader sense.
Exactly. I really like the idea of being able to, students come back with problems. We talk about the project, we talk about where they're at, we identify issues, and then we put them on the board and we walk through them together as a class. So, as we go through, I learn stuff too, right? I learned stuff about the industry, I learned stuff about the tools. And then the following class, I bring that in again too. So it's like a snowball, it continues to build on itself over time. The other thing is coaching. In addition to teaching, there's a big element of coaching that goes into it. One of the things, I coached youth football for 10 plus years. And one of the things I learned from that experience is every kid, and I'm talking about not necessarily students now, I'm talking about, athletes, young athletes, they're different. What motivates them is different. How to get them in the game and how to get them to learn. It's all different. Some kids just need you to say, go do it. Some kids you got to put your arm around their shoulder and say, what do you think would happen if you did this or you did that? And you did, and so getting to know the students and, strengths, weaknesses, how you can help them, that's key too. So there's some groups where you can say, I've had groups that are, have a couple of really quantitative students and you just say, put it in a spreadsheet and crunch it, let's look at this ratio, that ratio, the other ratio, and they just go do it. And you have other students that just, they're having trouble getting started, how do I get my arms around that idea? Where would you look? And so we have to sit down and frame it. What are the critical issues? Where do you start? What would a solution to that problem look like? And work through it together. I mean, that's it really, there's an experiential learning process that takes place. And honestly, it's not just the students are learning. The students are learning, but as the instructor, I'm learning too, and my clients are learning at the same time. The clients are learning about the university, they're learning about the students, they're learning about their problems. And you know what? They're looking at future employees as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like framing context. I mean, all of it is within some kind of context. You've been teaching this for a while, and how do you see? I mean, you kind of answered the next question I was going to ask, and that was, what's the personal growth path for you in teaching this over the years? So you can touch on that, but the bigger question I want to get to is, as you grow as a teacher, right? Where do you see this going? I mean, what's the trajectory that you can see from this point? You've done it to this point, and where you're going to go in the rest of your career.
That's a great question. I'm not sure I've thought through all that.
Well, it's okay. I'm here to try to, pull some of this out of people, because I think it's important to think about your teaching, right? I mean, and the growth as a teacher. So, I mean, I can take a non-answer as an answer.
No, I don't want to duck the question, but it's a serious response too. I mean, it takes a lot of work to teach a class like this. When you're talking about, sourcing projects, working with a client, working with a student, it means that, for example, I don't have just a regular slide deck I bring to each class. Every class is new, right? It's a new set of materials, new set of slides, new set of topics. So I have to be at the top of my game, just like the students have to be at the top of their game. And, the better game I bring, the better game they're able to bring. So we help each other in that regard. I really like being able to do that and work on additional, projects. I think being able to expand the domain of the projects we address is one way to go. The other thing is that this knowledge, or the things that we're doing, can enrich, as I showed on that sheet with all the other projects, enriches the other kinds of things we're working on too. Because the things I learned from this class allow me to do a better job of 346, 460 of entrepreneurship. Well, 346, we can talk about that. 346 is digital marketing. And what we do in that class these days is the students, we have student teams, and the students have to identify a client that is less than $1 million in revenue, and they offer them a free online consulting assessment, or an online marketing assessment. And then over the course of the term, the students talk to the client, understand what the client's goals are, understand what they have in place, understand what their budget is, and then they map out a plan for the client. And these are clients oftentimes that couldn't afford to do that work on their own, or to have a consultant do that work, but the students do it for them. So the students learn about digital marketing by doing, they learn about the business, and then they help the client, help somebody in the community who wouldn't be able to get that help. So I think being able to create that kind of value in the community has a lot of value to me as an instructor and as a member of the community. So I'd love to be able to do a lot more of that in the future. And I think that, being able to pull those concepts into other classes to add value to the community in different ways is, it's really valuable.
Yeah. So here's another teaching question. So what are the areas of growth that you feel you need to work on as a teacher, for this BA 498? Like, what are the things that you could do to become a better teacher?
That's another good one. Another good question. I think as good as you think you are working with teams and coaching and guiding and stuff, there's always something to learn. There's, this is not, I mean, an exact analogy, but it reminds me of kids. You have your first, you have your first kid and your child, and you work with them, and you think you got it all figured out, and so you have your second one, and you realize, oh my gosh, it's completely different, right? And working with athletes and working with students is kind of the same way. You as soon as you think you got it all figured out, somebody throws you a curveball or something completely new, and so there's a new situation, a new personality to work with, a new set of challenges, and you need to be able to identify. I'm not saying that I'm the world's best at this. I certainly need to continue to improve at identifying that early, being able to identify it early, address it, make sure things stay on the right path. I'm the first one to admit that that I learn a lot from these classes too, not just about the industry. I mean, I learn a lot about the industry and the technology, and it helps that I've got 25 years in industry working in technology and doing consulting and things like that. So I've seen a lot of stuff, but there's always something new. I mean, there's always something new. I always run into things I haven't seen before, things I need to learn about. And then, there's two other things I guess that come to mind. One of them is, even though you know how to do it, you have to let the students do the work, and it would be so much easier sometimes if I just jumped in, I pulled up a spreadsheet, put in the numbers and said, there it is. But that doesn't help. That doesn't help them, right? And so and if they're doing it, maybe it'll take a couple times. Maybe the first time it's not right, and the second time it's not right. So you have to be patient and let them do the work, even though it might be more expedient to do pieces of it for them. The second thing, and this is the hardest lesson of all, is that it is the student's project. And there have been a number of projects where I didn't agree with what the students came up with, and they presented to a client, and they have to be able to justify it, but they feel strongly about it. But it's their project, it's not my project. I mean, it is my project too. I participate in it, but they need to own it. And usually in those cases, we'll work with the client on the back end and say, hey, I understand what the students were thinking. Here are a couple of other ideas you might want to consider. And we could talk about this offline if that helps. But in the context of the presentation and the delivery, the students need to own it. It needs to be their project. And I need to support them in that, even if I don't 100% agree.
Yeah, and I've got probably the last follow-up here to kind of wind things up. So if someone else was teaching a course like this, a capstone course that's fairly unstructured, that's sort of student-centered in terms of the project, what's the advice you give them?
Don't.
I don't think that's the right answer.
No, I wouldn't say that, because I do think it's an incredibly valuable process for the students. It's incredibly valuable for the community. It's the process we need to use to get to goal 5, not just in this class, but in lots of classes. I mean, that's how we create lasting economic value in the rural community, I believe. So we need to do this kind of thing, and not just in business. You can imagine in lots of different fields, we could do some stuff like this. Even in the arts and the sciences, I mean, there's lots of opportunity. You know,
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of, I'm an education person, so I could see something like that really working in that as well. So,
sure.
um, did you have any mentors? I mean, how did you know how to teach this? Had you taken a course like this, or was it a concept that you had, or, I mean, what
Yeah.
prepared you?
Well, I've worked on, I think I've done 8 technology startups now. And so I've built a number of businesses, bought businesses, sold businesses. And then, like a lot of entrepreneurs do, I went into consulting, and I was a partner in a consulting company called Cube Management in the Portland area. And I did strategic marketing and all of our digital marketing initiatives. So websites, social media, although social media was not as critical back then, but email marketing, things like that. And I started engaging with clients through Cube Management, and I really liked the variety of the projects, being able to solve problems for people and being able to help add value. Some of the companies I worked on are very big companies now, very successful companies, and I'd like to think I have a hand in doing that. So as I, transitioned into teaching, doing more and more teaching, working with students, I really enjoyed that. But it was an opportunity to blend teaching with that consulting, which honestly is a great way to stay sharp, right? Stay up with what's happening in the industry, what's happening with the tools, what things are relevant. So being able to keep my skills sharp and to push myself in addition to working with the students. So I think that's the other thing too, is to find a way to keep it interesting and fresh for the instructor too, not just for the students. I mean, this could be incredibly rewarding as long as it stays challenging and fresh and fun too, but it is a lot of work. I mean, I won't lie about that. I mean, it does take a lot of effort on the part of the faculty and the part of the students to make it work. But I think it's worth it. And I've seen enough smiling faces at the end of this process to know that the students, they may not feel that way at week 6, but when we finish it up, they're feeling pretty good about the process.
Yeah, well, I think we can wrap this up a little bit, but I appreciate you coming forward and talking about this unique program and sort of, me pestering you a little bit about the teaching side of this. Um, yeah, it was very interesting discussion, very interesting course. I had some, prior knowledge of your teaching of it, but it's just interesting to see how you overcome some of those challenges and what those challenges are. But I like the idea of just coming back to what's it called? The fifth, what is it?
Oh yeah, goal 5.
Goal 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that sometimes when we get lost in our teaching, I think we need those things to kind of reflect on, some just simple statement that sort of brings it all back home again, because you can get lost in teaching, I think, sometimes in terms of what the expectations are and whether or not you're feeling you're successful in being an educator. So
Exactly. Well, and we're a public university. I mean, it's our job to deliver value to all the communities we serve, right? Not just our students.
absolutely. Well, Wilson, thank you so much for doing this. This was good.
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It was fun. I enjoyed being able to put it together and talk about it. And honestly, the process helped me think through it as well. Being able to think through, remind me again of what we're doing, how many projects we worked on, all the good we've done in the community, and what makes it all work. So that was good for me.
It's always, I think it's always good to reflect on your teaching whenever you get an opportunity to do it.
It's true. Yeah. Well, thank you, David. I appreciate it.
All right. Very good.